It's always a pleasure to speak at these days, at these pond days. And I know that Alana and Evdokia work really hard to put, and our PAC committee, who contributes to this effort, works really hard to put it all together and bring the science and the research and some of the practical applications to you. So I'll quickly tell you my story, but I really don't want to talk about my story. And that's because it's about the fourth or fifth time I've been speaking at this event, and I am kind of getting tired of just telling my story because I'm at a phase where I want to move it forward. So my brief story is that I'm a parent of a child who was diagnosed with autism almost 17 years ago, and he's just almost 18. So he was just 1.5 or 1 in 17 months when he was diagnosed. And immediately we got involved, and he was diagnosed in Toronto, and immediately we got involved in the autism research community as parents and family participants. So that's the beginning of my story, and it continues with me standing here today as an advocate for parent participation in research and in autism research in particular, but I do know that there are other issues we've talked about today, ADHD and epilepsy and the other neurodevelopmental disorders that are included, but my story is related to autism. What I really want to say is that participation can mean so many things to families and to the community. And most of you, I'm going to assume, are parents. There's a few scientists and clinicians left in the room, but most of you are parents. And there's a lot of questions when you think you're all here because you have participated and you've been involved in POND. But we all have different ideas of what participation in autism research or research means. First of all, we need to understand more clearly what research can mean, because research can be, as we've seen today, mouse models and understanding mice in the lab and the biology and biomarkers, and it can be very biological and very focused on a lab. But also research can be clinically based research, where you're sitting down with somebody who works with Evdokia, who might run through an interview with you. Or perhaps your child is going in and having a brain scan or having some blood taken. So research has different meanings. And I think that's something that we need to dispel as a community and do a better job even as parents and as participants in better understanding and communicating when we say we're participating in research. So what does that mean? So that's the first thing I want to clarify, and would love to see some perhaps more parent days include really basic things about research and dispelling myths about research and how research happens. Another thing that I like to talk about too is that research doesn't have all the answers, and researchers are not just over here and parents are over here. And I think now is the time in 2016 and moving forward where shifts are really happening in Canada, where there's this focus and need and understanding of the patient researcher clinician relationship and how important that is. And we all sitting in the room are part of that relationship, and we can influence directions that research can take. And I've thought a lot about this, and I said, well, how can we influence if we're sitting across, from our clinician and we're answering some questions? So what? We give our answers, but we can also describe and articulate our observations, and we can describe what we're going through. And we, as individual parents, we have needs for sure, and we have individual needs, but we also have things to say, and we also have things we observe. And I really challenge everybody in the room to think about what they're observing, what they want, and not just so much what you need in the moment to solve and fix your problem, because we know the benefits of that, yes, there are answers, but research isn't going to give us all those answers. But if we can really think about what we want and what we're observing, how a research and patient partnership could really impact the directions that research in neurodevelopmental disorders move forward. And I recently came back from a Canada-wide conference with an organization very similar to the OBI, the Ontario Brain Institute, called NeuroDevNet. And it's a cross-Canada-wide center of excellence in brain research and health. And one of the things that I took as a participant, and I was asked to go, and I was also funded to go, to give my observations and input, what I really noticed was there was a real focus on patient-researcher partnership to impact policy, and impact policy in government. And I think this is what Marg is talking about, that we could actually, by understanding better the evidence-based research, that we can actually make informed statements along with our own stories to impact policy in the future. And I think there's a real movement now in Canada to affect the policy and thinking on neurodevelopmental disorders. And we, as a parent body, can really do that by understanding research better. So how do you understand research better? You come to these kinds of days. But you also now, and I know because personally the things that I've done over the number of years I've been involved, is I have relationships. I recognize many of you, and I talk to some of you. I definitely have relationships with clinicians and scientists, and I go to them and say, how and where can my input be heard? How can I tell my story? And I'll give you one personal example, and then I'll end, and I hope that I've been able to share a little bit of how getting involved in research can really change things. It wasn't an Ontario Brain Institute day. It was a number of months ago, and we as the PAC committee was invited to spend the day with other PAC committees from other groups. So as the PON PAC, we were one group, and there were other PAC groups from across OBI. And I went up to the fellow who manages the knowledge translation. His name is Kurt, and now I'm forgetting his last name, Nyland. And I said to Kurt, Kurt, I have stories to tell, and I want to tell my story, but I want to get in front of a minister or somebody and just tell my story. And I have positive things to share, and I have negatives, and I have things I want to get out of it. But I don't really want to tell them everything I need. I just want to tell them my story. And before I knew it, by conveying my interest to Kurt, I was standing in front of the Premier of Ontario, and an Ontario Brain Institute and OBI had invited a number of us to present in front of Kathleen Wynne, and got a brief chance to just tell my story and talk about the successes and some of the issues. And it's just one little thing of talking about what you want to do or what you might see. You can have impact. So I just want to leave you with that we as a community, I think things are changing in Canada, and we can have more impact, but we need to participate in research. And again, that can be in all the ways I've described. And I think now is the time to do it. So I encourage you as a community to talk to Evdokia and say, what can I do? So thank you all. And if you have any, you want to talk to me after, I'm happy to do so.
I have a 10-year-old son who has Fragile X syndrome, which is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It's genetic. If you don't know what it is, don't worry, neither did we. And then he is co-diagnosed with autism, ADHD, and anxiety. I have twin 6-year-old girls, one of whom is also diagnosed with anxiety, Fragile X syndrome, and one of whom they tell me is neurotypical, but I don't really believe them. So I want to kind of pick up where Connie put it down, and I want to talk a little bit about why I'm involved in the PAC, and that is the idea of advocating and being an advocate. I'm about 10 years earlier on the journey than Connie is, and I think that that's one of the most important reasons why we participate in the research. And that's what Connie is talking about within the context of informing ourselves and being here and having this knowledge. What do we do with this? We take it away and we put it into practice in our daily lives, and we look at the sensory diets and we go home and we say, oh, maybe I need to tweak my sensory diet, or maybe I need to get an OT. We look at the information that's presented about the science and we say, maybe I should start giving my kid probiotics. But what it also enables us to do is to take that information out into our communities and to help to build those communities. So we can take that information into the schools when we're advocating for our children, and that's one of the most important things that we can be doing while our children are in school is being there and asking these incredibly underfunded resources to give us more and to do more for our children. And it's really hard to do that when you're the parent standing there saying, but I want you to see ability, not disability. I don't only want you to focus on the weaknesses because you're just making my child less weak. I want you to focus on the strengths so that you can make them stronger. And when you're the parent standing there having those conversations, a lot of times you kind of get that look of, yeah, that's mom. Or, well, you know, dad doesn't really understand the realities. But when you have the research that you can come in with, and when you have the information from the professionals, when you have the information on sensory diets and the latest best practices and gold standards, you can bring that information with you. Sharing that information gives you ammunition, if you will, to get the best for your child. And I think when you share that information, you're also then, just like with the research, not only helping your child, you're helping the children that are going to come after you. You help to make that teacher a better teacher, and they are going to be a better teacher for the kids that come after. So this process of being a part of the research and learning more about it is something that we're going to take out into our communities and help to build better communities to help drive policy, but also in our own day-to-day lives. And so that's why we participate in the research. And I think that if you take something away from here today to make your kids' daily lives better, it would be to be their advocates and to use this knowledge to be a better advocate. Thank you.